My wife and I have been together for just over 20 years. I'm 40 now, and I can say we've built a pretty good life. We've got 2 teenagers, Luke 17 and Noah 15, who are doing really well. I finished college a while back, and Addison wrapped up her final year when we tied the knot. These days I work as an engineering manager at a mid-sized company, while Addison holds a position as a legal assistant at a large law firm. We're both pretty active, hitting the gym regularly, and we like to spend our weekends hiking when time allows. Our kids are doing great, they're well-rounded, excel in school, and are quite popular among their peers. For me, there's nothing more rewarding than being there for their games, performances, and weekend adventures. I make sure to be involved, whether it's helping with homework or organizing our next camping trip. In my role at work, I've gotten pretty good at delegating, so I rarely need to stay late or work weekends. Addison's job is a bit more demanding when she's handling big cases, but even then, late nights aren't. Brandon Howard, a young, confident, and somewhat aloof lawyer, joined Addison's firm. He was the type to turn heads and was fit and self-assured, though not particularly social. I first met him at a work event where I saw him openly flirt with Addison. She brushed it off, telling me it was nothing serious, but I wasn't quite convinced. Addison listened to my concerns but didn't see eye to eye with me on the matter. A few days passed and life resumed as usual. Addison had been working on a big case for the last 2 years, and as it wrapped up, she was working longer hours. She kept me in the loop each evening, but the flirting between her and Brandon didn't let up. It actually seemed to intensify after the case ended. The senior partner at her firm rented out a mountain cabin for a celebratory weekend, inviting everyone involved and their spouses. We left our kids at home for the weekend, knowing they were old enough to manage without us. We arrived at the cabin that Friday night and settled in, despite Brandon's ongoing attempts to charm Addison. The evening was generally pleasant. I spent most of it chatting with Chuck and Lou, the couple who owned the place. The next morning, however, things started to feel off again. I woke up to the smell of coffee while Addison was still asleep, so I headed into the kitchen wearing a t-shirt and shorts. Chuck and Lou were getting breakfast ready, so I offered to help. Aside from them, there was Brandon, his colleague George, and their spouses, along with Katie and her husband James. When breakfast was ready, I saw Brandon sitting next to Addison. I said, "Hey, I think you're in my spot." Addison, without missing a beat, replied, "Oh, we're in the middle of a conversation. Do you mind sitting over there just this once?" I tried to brush it off, replying, "I was hoping to sit with you and enjoy breakfast together," but she just laughed it off, saying it's fine. "We can talk anytime." I've seen this kind of thing a lot before. I was pretty surprised, to be honest. I suddenly wasn't hungry, so I put my plate down, got another coffee, and went out to the terrace to think. I couldn't get the looks I'd seen off my mind. It was clear that everyone had noticed something, and I had a sinking feeling. As the day went on, I had a feeling that things weren't going to end well. Addison spent most of her time with Brandon. The only time she was with me was when we were hanging out with the group on the hike. She walked with Brandon at the lake. She swam with him. I reminded her more than once that she was my wife, not his. She said it was just a date, but I told her she was being paranoid. By dinner, I was tired of it. When we went out to the terrace after dinner, I decided to make my move. Just as Brandon was about to sit beside Addison, I slid in next to her, nudging him out of the way. Addison was clearly annoyed. She shot me a look that could kill. I just smiled and took her hand. When she tried to pull away, I held on tighter. The atmosphere quickly became awkward, and the tension was obvious to everyone. After what felt like an eternity, I made an excuse about being tired from the day's activities and got up to head to bed. Before going to bed, I went to the kitchen to fix myself a drink. While I was putting the bourbon away, Addison walked in. "John, we need to talk. Before you go to sleep," she said. "Well, this is unexpected," I said, my voice tight with disbelief. "We've had the entire day, and yet you spent most of it talking to everyone. But especially with Brandon, you barely said 2 words to your own husband." I watched as a faint blush crept across her cheeks. "Yeah, I know," she said, shifting uncomfortably, "but there's something I need to explain. This should be good. Listen, first of all, I need you to understand that I've never cheated on you, not once. I'm struggling to believe how you acted this weekend. I did flirt with Brandon, but that's it. He hasn't laid a hand on me except for a couple of times during the hike today, when he helped me with the rough spots. I've been faithful to you and I'd never think of crossing that line, but there is no but. That's why I'm talking to you now. I need you to know there's a real attraction between me and Brandon. The flirting has built up a lot of tension, and I've made a decision. I'm going to spend the night with him. I'm telling you up front, so it's not like I'm going behind your back. I don't want this." To be considered cheating, she blinked as if she hadn't heard me. I repeated what I said. "No, I'm not okay with this. I'm not going to give my approval if you go through with it, because there will be serious consequences." I added, "I won't just stand by and let this happen, John. I've already made up my mind. There's so much tension between us. I need to do this. It's just one time. When we get home tomorrow, everything will go back to normal." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I was the one being unreasonable. "If you really loved me, you'd let me do this just once. If you really loved me, you wouldn't even be asking. John, I need to do this just this once, and then I'll come back to you fully, completely yours." "Addison," I said, holding her gaze, "do you remember our wedding vows? The part where we promised to forsake all others? You made that vow in front of everyone, our friends, our families, and God. And now you expect me to believe this new promise you're making in secret without any witnesses. Okay, John, I see you're upset. We'll talk about it in the morning. Let's talk about it in the morning. Let's figure it out on the drive home tomorrow." With that, she turned on her heel and walked back outside, as if she hadn't just shattered 20 years of marriage. I stood there, stunned by how easily she dismissed me. I was expecting her to wait for me like some loyal dog, as if nothing had changed. But that's not how I operate. We talked about this before. Cheating wasn't something we tolerated, no matter the circumstances. It wasn't just about secrecy or sneaking around. Even if she told me first, the act itself was betrayal. I poured the rest of my drink down the sink. I didn't need alcohol to make the decision. I'd already started to think about it. I went upstairs and started packing my things. I left her stuff untouched. She could deal with that herself. I sat on the bed for a while, waiting. I heard the others come back to the house. Their voices were fading as they headed to bed. I gave it. Another half-hour passed before I made my move, bag in hand. I crept out of the room, slipping down the stairs and outside as silently as I could. My car was parked farther down, away from the others. I slid into the driver's seat, started it up, and pulled away. The engine barely made a sound. It was just after 2. It's 0. It was 10:30 a.m. When I got home, the lights were still on inside, which meant at least one of the kids was awake. I sighed and headed for the door. Of course, both Luke and Noah were still up, glued to the TV watching a movie. "Dad, what are you doing home so early? I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow." Luke said, looking over, "Yeah, where's Mom?" Noah added, "Well," I said, answering Noah's question, "we'll explain both of yours. Your mom stayed behind. She's still at the cottage in bed with her new boyfriend. I know I shouldn't have involved the kids, but I was too tired to beat around the bush. I figured being direct was better than letting them find out some other way." Could I have said it more gently? Sure, I could have. Did I feel like it? Not really. "What do you mean in bed with her new boyfriend? Is Mom really cheating on you?" Noah asked, his voice rising with disbelief. "That's exactly what I mean. She told me tonight that she was going to sleep with someone else. I decided I wasn't going to sit around, and I decided to wait for that, so I packed my stuff and left. She'll get a lift home with him tomorrow." We talked a little more, but there wasn't much else to say. After that, I grabbed my things and moved into the spare room. The next hour was spent moving all my clothes and belongings from the room ID shared with Addison to what was now my room. Fortunately, the guest room had a decent bed and its own bathroom. Once everything was settled, I collapsed onto the bed, my body finally giving in to the exhaustion. I didn't even remember falling asleep. A few hours later, I woke up to the phone ringing non-stop. I saw Addison's name on the screen and knew she was trying to reach me. I let it go straight to voicemail. My notifications showed a flood of texts and missed calls. She'd been trying to reach me for a while. I skimmed through her messages and listened to the voicemails. The first ones were casual. They asked where I was and let me know breakfast was ready. Then by the time I got to my phone, her messages were pretty intense. She was worried, then angry, then furious. She was demanding to know where I'd gone and insisting I come back to pick her up. The last message said she'd found a ride home and warned me she'd have plenty to say once she got here. Since I was awake, there wasn't much point in going back to bed. Addison's storm was set to hit in a few hours, and I knew it was going to be ugly. She didn't sound sorry in any of her messages. I got myself out of bed and took a shower. I got dressed and went downstairs. By the time I'd finished breakfast, the kids were already up. I told them they might want to steer clear when their mom got home, as she wasn't in the best of moods. To my surprise, they just shrugged and laughed. It was clear they weren't on her side either. The door slammed so hard it rattled the walls, announcing Addison's dramatic entrance. "Where the hell have you been?" she snapped, practically vibrating with anger. "Oh, I couldn't resist leaving you hanging," I said dryly, giving her a look that could cut glass. Her face flushed crimson, then deepened to purple. I briefly wondered if she might explode. I was considering whether to call an ambulance when she let loose. "How could you leave me like that? Do you have any idea how humiliating it was this morning? Everyone found out you ditched me and I had to beg for a ride. I was planning on spending the day with you in bed, no less, but now forget it." I leaned back, barely holding back a smirk. "I'm sure you think it's humiliating, but it's nothing compared to how I felt when you slept with someone else. I've lost all interest in being with you like that. You're not the woman I married." She was shocked and looked at me like I'd slapped her. "How can you say I'm still your wife? I'm still your wife on paper, but you made a choice last night. Maybe we're still married, but I don't think so. She's not the same person she was." I blinked, confused. "I don't understand. What are you talking about? You seem to think that telling me about it beforehand somehow makes what you did okay. I didn't lie to you. I told you in advance. Let me ask you something. Did you sleep with Brandon?" She stood there for a moment before responding. Her voice was defiant. "Yes, I told you I was going to. You went through with it willingly, of course," she snapped. "Why would I go? I said I wasn't going to, but I went to bed with him anyway." I felt a strange sense of finality settle over me. "Then you cheated. It doesn't matter that you told me first. You didn't ask for my thoughts or care about my feelings. You made up your mind and expected me to just go along with it. I even told you not to do it, and that I wasn't okay with it, but you didn't care. You just went ahead and did it anyway. So let me make this clear. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have even considered it." I turned and walked out to the garage, needing space to think over the next few months. Addison made multiple attempts to talk to me, but I wasn't interested. Late at night, she'd knock on my door, but I'd already changed the locks. She didn't have a key. We were nothing more than strangers living in the same house, roommates, caring for our kids, but nothing else. Why didn't I just file for divorce? It was simple, the kids. I didn't want to be a part of that. I loved Luke and Noah too much to miss out on their lives. Plus, Noah only had a few years left before graduating and heading off to college. Addison tried to use them to manipulate me into speaking to her. But it didn't work. The kids were just as upset with her as I was. She even tried turning them against me, but that didn't work either. She was trying to turn them against me, but Luke wasn't falling for it. One day she said, "Mom, Dad's never badmouthed you to us, not once, but you've complained about him plenty of times. If we're angry with you, it's because of what you did, not because of anything Dad said." Things in the house were tense, to say the least, for about 4 months. A few months later, Addison started trying a new tactic. She'd walk around in skimpy clothes when the kids weren't home, trying to catch my attention. I'll admit it wasn't easy to ignore. She's still an attractive woman, but I couldn't forget the humiliation she put me through, flaunting her affair with Brandon like it was nothing. I was tempted, but I couldn't bring myself to cross that line again. 6 months have passed since that night, and nothing has been the same. "I can't take this anymore, John." She stood there in a sheer black negligee, her voice desperate. "I need you. I want you, please. I'm begging, take me. I need you to come upstairs and make love to me. I can't keep enduring this, and if you won't, then I'll find someone else who will. I told you last week that this was coming, and this is your last chance. Please don't make me walk out that door." I took a long look at her, and despite the situation, I couldn't deny she looked beautiful. "Stunning," I said, evenly. "I'm sure you won't have any trouble finding someone willing to take you to bed, but just so you know, if you do, I'll take that as my permission to do the same. John, that's not what I want. I'm offering myself to you, and you keep turning me down. I don't want to be with anyone else, and I don't want you with other women, but you're making me think about it. If you don't need me anymore, why not just divorce me? Is that what you want? Do you want out?" "No," she whispered, tears welling up. "I want to be your wife again." Funny how that works. You didn't act much like my wife. I'm back at the cabin, so I'm not sure why you expect things to be different now. She took a shaky breath. "Because I promised you. And over 20 years ago, you made the same vow to me. I gave a short, bitter laugh. Yeah, 20 years ago, we promised each other a lot of things, but look where we are now. Don't expect anything. For me anymore. Her voice hardened. Fine, if you're serious about that, then I might as well start looking for someone else. You're the one who's forced me into this situation. Be my guest. But remember, if you go down that path, I won't hold back. I've had more than a couple of women show interest, and I'm not the... She was holding back at this point, her face flushed with anger. If you sleep with someone else, I'll divorce you so fast your head will spin. I'll take the house, the kids, and a good chunk of our assets. You'll be left in some dingy apartment eating ramen with the child support and alimony. You'll be paying me, and I'll make your visits with the kids as unpleasant as I can. I leaned back, unimpressed. Good luck with that. You do realize the kids are old enough to choose who they want to live with. I bet on who they'll pick. Go ahead and run off and have your fun. I won't stop you. She broke down. Her voice was cracking. What do you want from me? How long do I have to suffer? How can I make you love me again? Her sobs echoed through the room. I stood there, my voice cold. There's nothing you can do. You crossed the line. You slept with another man and humiliated me in front of everyone. So what do I want? We're going to have to coexist, nothing more. We'll stay under the same roof for the next 3 years until Noah finishes high school. Once he turns 18 and heads off to college, we'll divorce and that'll be the end of it. Until then, we'll live together for the kids' sake. If you want to file for divorce, go ahead. I won't. You just need to be ready for the kids to want to stay with me. You'll be the one paying child support and I'll be staying in this house. She shook her head. I can't live like this. I can't handle the thought of you being with someone else whenever you're not home. I can't trust you anymore. Her voice faltered. But if this is what it takes to keep the kids in a stable household, then fine. We'll live under the same roof, but we'll be divorced in everything but name. You can date whoever you want, just like I can. The only rule is that you don't bring anyone back here. That's how things went. She got ready, put on her makeup. She played the part just like she said she would, and I started dating too for a month or so. She tried to fight it and lure me back to her bed, but I wasn't interested. Well, not most of the time anyway. I'll admit there were a few nights when I let my guard down after a couple of drinks, but even those slips, unfortunately, we couldn't erase what had happened. We settled into a routine where we were cordial, almost distant, but we kept up appearances for the sake of the kids. From the outside, we still looked like a family, attending events together and keeping the facade alive. However, it wasn't long before our friends and colleagues started catching on. I dated a few women from work, just like she did with men from her firm. She still tried to seduce me from time to time, and I'll admit I gave in more than once. She's still beautiful after all, and sometimes the past would creep up in moments of weakness. So this is it, Addison said, her eyes glistening with tears as I loaded another box into my truck. Yeah, I said simply. That's it. Thanks for 20 years. It had been 3 long years since that night in the cabin. Noah had just moved into his college dorm, and Luke was about to start her freshman year. The house had been sold, and here we were packing up the last remnants of our old life. The divorce was already in motion, and the paperwork was nearly complete. We had split everything. We had agreed on the split of our assets, and the kids' college funds were set. Now we were finally going our separate ways. I still love you, she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. We could stay in touch, call each other sometimes, maybe meet up now and then. There'd be no pressure, no commitments, just see each other by then. The anger and hurt had faded. I didn't love her the way I once had, but I didn't hate her anymore either. She'd become more of a friend than anything else. And of course we will always be connected through the kids. I nodded slowly. We can do that. We'll still have birthdays, graduations, weddings, plenty of moments to share. One day, we'll have grandkids. The kids had forgiven Addison for what happened. Their relationship wasn't the same, but it had mended over time. Addison bought herself a cozy 3-bedroom apartment. We ended up in a bedroom apartment in town, which was a good solution for the kids when they came to visit. Meanwhile, I bought a small house with a couple of acres, complete with a workshop. It was a small town, so we bumped into each other from time to time. We called each other now and then and sometimes went out to lunch or dinner, just to keep up the habit. There was never any real chance of reconciliation, though she tried a few times. I dated casually, as did she. Eventually, Addison had a few longer-term relationships, and for me, I decided I'd had enough of being tied down and enough of exclusivity. Marriage boiled down to two things for me: raising kids, or growing old together. I'd already done the first and didn't see the point in doing the second. I had friends and family for company if I ever got lonely. One afternoon, 5 years after our divorce, Addison invited me to lunch at a nicer place than usual. I could tell something was up. "John, I have a big favor to ask. I don't know how you'll feel about it, but I'd really appreciate it if you would at least consider it." I put down my fork and leaned back. "Just ask. I figured you needed something when you called me up for lunch today. Where's your boyfriend, by the way? Won't he be jealous of you having lunch with your ex?" She smiled. "No, he knows about us, and he trusts me. He even suggested I ask you alone because he thought it might be awkward if he were here. He's happy to answer your call if you want to check with him, though." "So, are you in love with him? Have you moved on from us? I'll never completely forget what we had," she said, her voice soft, "but yes, I've made peace with it. I do love Martin. I'm happy with him and I want to spend the rest of my life with him," I said slowly, curious about what she needed from me. "My blessing? You don't need it, but you've got it anyway. It's more than that, actually." Her voice faltered for a moment. "I want you to walk me down the aisle. I want you to give me away at my wedding." I stared at her, stunned. "Wait, what? You want me, your ex-husband, to walk you down the aisle, Addison? Most people wouldn't even invite their ex to their wedding, let alone have them be part of the ceremony." "I know it sounds strange," she admitted, "but Martin and I have talked it over, and he's okay with it." I shook my head, trying to wrap my mind around the idea. "Why would you want to do that?" She took a deep breath and explained. "John, besides my dad, you've been the most important man in my life. He's not around anymore, and asking Noah to walk me down the aisle doesn't feel right. He's my son, not someone who should be giving me away. It feels wrong with you, though. You were my partner for most of my life. We may not be together anymore, but you were the last man who held my heart. In a way, I want you to pass it to Martin to show that you've let go, and that you're passing me on to someone who will cherish me. It's symbolic, like saying goodbye to the past and welcoming the future." I let out a long breath, still unsure how I felt about it. "That's a lot to process." "Yeah," she admitted it. "It does sound a little weird to me too, but it makes sense to us." I needed time to think, so I did what I rarely did. I took her offer seriously that evening. I called Martin. We went for a drink and talked it through. He said he wasn't sure about the idea at first, but after hearing her reasons, he changed his mind. He told me he wanted the ceremony to reflect how Addison had grown and moved on. After talking with him, I was a bit unsure about it at first, but I could see where they were coming from. I even spoke to the kids to get their opinions. Noah thought it was a bit strange, but he didn't object. Luke just shrugged and said she was fine with it after all. It was what her mom wanted in the end. I agreed it still felt a little strange, but I also felt like it was the end of our relationship and the start of her new life. The ceremony was actually beautiful. There were a few raised eyebrows and plenty of whispers during the reception, but most people had positive things to say. A few women even approached me asking if I was interested in dating now that I had clearly moved on. Who knows? There might be some potential there. It looks like my weekends might be a little more exciting for the next month or two. Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. Trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.